Hi, this is Matt Allington, and today I'm going to show you a tutorial on how I went about creating this column and line chart that you see on the screen. Now, what's interesting about this column and line chart is in my database I have two calendar tables. I have a day calendar table and I have a time calendar table, and the data that I've loaded actually contains the date and time in two separate columns. Now, this is actually best practice. You should preferably split your date time columns into date and time, but when you do that it creates an interesting problem, and what I'm showing you here on this line is a rolling 3-hourly total of the average consumption. In this case it's of my domestic electricity consumption. It's showing me a rolling 3-hourly average, but when I filter on January 14th, 2018, I need to still be able to go back into Saturday, January the 13th and grab my consumption late in the day in order to come up with this rolling 3-hourly average. And so I'm going to step you through the process that I went through to solve this problem so that I could add and remove the filters that I needed to be able to get the rolling 3-hourly average that I was after. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is load up some sample data. This is some data that I've extracted from my solar electricity system at home, but this is actually my consumption data for the month of January 2018. And you can see that I have a date time column, and these values represent the total watts consumed within that 15-minute period starting from midnight on January 2018. So I'm going to import this data into Power BI Desktop. So here I am in Power BI Desktop, and the first thing I'm going to do is actually split this column into two pieces. I want the date as a single column and I want the time as a single column as well. This is the preferred way of loading date time data. Date time columns are highly unique and therefore they compress very poorly, and best practice is to split those columns into two wherever possible. So to split this data into two columns, first of all I'm going to select the column and I'll go add column time, and I'll basically insert a new column that just contains the time portion, and then with this one I'll just go to transform and I'll turn this into the date only portion, and then I can rename this column. So now I've got date and time, and I should also change this to, I'll do a fixed decimal and I'll rename this and I'll call it watts. Okay, so there's my data, and I also have a calendar table here which I'm going to load. I've got this calendar table just for the period January 18, and I also need a time calendar. Now I could create one of these from scratch, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference this data query, and I'll turn this into my time calendar table. In this case the calendar table is time only, and then I'll remove the other columns and I'll remove the duplicates. And whenever you have a calendar table, I highly recommend adding an index column. If you've got an integer index like this, it allows you to do numeric addition and subtraction in order to go back and forward in time. And so let's call this time ID. Okay, so now I've got all the data that I want. I will close and apply and stick that into Power BI, and we'll have a look at that data. Okay, so now I have my data loaded. I'll jump over to the relationship view, and here is my data table and my two calendar tables. One is day and one is at 15-minute time intervals. And so I should be able to just join these together. Whenever you create these relationships, it's good practice just to hover over them to make sure that the relationship was created correctly. In this case it is. And now let's come over here and we'll have a look at a quick report. So I'll have a look at the date. Now this is the auto date hierarchy. I really don't like that. I leave it on because I need to show people during my live training courses that you should be turning it off. A bit ironic really. So if you come under options here, I can turn that off for a single workbook. Turn it off here, and if you want to turn it off permanently you can come up here and turn it off, but I leave it on as a reminder so that I can show people during my training classes that they should be turning that off. So let me bring the date in. So there's the list of my dates that I've got there, and I'm going to add a table. I'll bring in the total watts that have been used. Now this has come in as a currency format because I set it as fixed decimal place. So I just need to change that to a general. Okay, that got fixed that. And then what I really should do is bring in my time stamp. I'll bring that in so that we can see consumption throughout the day. So this time is coming from the time calendar, dates coming from the date calendar. I'm actually going to hide these other two columns just so that I don't accidentally use those columns inside my formulas. Okay, now this is watts, and really I'd like to use something a little bit more intuitive. So what I'll do is I'll convert this into kilowatt hours, and so I'll write a measure and I'll call this total kWh, kilowatt hours, and I need to add up the watts that are consumed, and I need to divide it by 1,000 to get it into kilowatts, and then also divide it by 4 because these are in 4, they're 15-minute blocks. So I've divided by 4 as well. I'll take it to kilowatt hours. So I just times that by 4 being the denominator. And okay, let's see what happens. So that should be total kilowatt hours, and I can remove my watts now. It's interesting that's picked up the default formatting, so that's not what I'm after. So I'll go general, and okay, so there we go. So there's my total kilowatt hours. This is over all days. If I pick a particular day, you'll see the kilowatt hours consumption every 15 minutes throughout the day. So now let's get on with writing the more complex formula. What I'd like to calculate is what is the rolling 3-hourly consumption in kilowatt hours throughout the day. And so I'm going to use the variable syntax to do this because it just makes the whole process of debugging and testing formulas so much easier. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to use my new time ID column that I created. So if I add that in here, you can see my time ID, it's actually formatted with 2 decimal places. That doesn't make any sense. I'll turn it back, and you can see now that for each time of the day I've got this unique time ID, and it goes up to 96 because there are obviously 96 quarterly hour periods. And what I want to calculate now is a rolling 3-hourly consumption number so that I can see that over time. And so I can't use the inbuilt time intelligence because inbuilt time intelligence only works if you have a day level of granularity. In this case, we have 15 minutes level of granularity, and so we need to solve the problem using the custom time intelligence pattern. So let me show you how I go about solving this problem. So I'm going to write my new measure, and I'm going to use the variable syntax. So let me start off by first of all trying to identify which time ID is currently selected for each time throughout the day. So you can see the time ID here. In this case, I just have it as a column coming in as a value, but I want to be able to access this number inside my measure. So the first thing I'll do is I'll define a variable, and I'll call this the current time ID. And that will just be, there's various options. I could use min or max or whatever because it is an integer column, but probably safer to use selected value of the time ID. So if there's a single value, it will tell me what that value is, and if there's more than one value, it will return blank. Shift enter, and then I'm going to return the current time ID. So I like to break the problem into pieces like this and check every piece before I proceed. So my measure is just called measure at this stage, which is fine. I'll come back and look at this later. I'm not going to worry about changing the data types at the moment, and I'll come back and look at that later as well. So you can see that this measure is correctly giving me the current time ID. So it's basically the filter has been placed here on the calendar table. After the filter has been applied, I'm working out what that single value for time ID is and returning that inside a measure. Now, if I'm going to do a rolling 3-hourly period, I need 12 consecutive periods. So at this point in time here, 2:45 a.m., I will need the 12. I'll need everything from 1 through to 12. So I need this one plus the previous 11 values. And in order to be able to do that, I really need to know what is the starting point for this time ID. In fact, I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this my 2 time ID. So this is where it goes up to. And now I'm going to do another variable, and this will be my from time ID. And that will simply be the 2 time ID subtract 11, and just let me check that that is working. So return the from ID. And so you can see here that at the time I get to the 12th time, it's correctly identifying that I need from 1 to 12 and so on. These areas here are going to be a problem. We're going to come back and fix that later. But for now, this is going to work from any time ID from 12 and above. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the custom time intelligence pattern, which is calculate, and the number I want to calculate is the total kilowatt hours. But before I calculate the total kilowatt hours, I need to change the filters that are coming from my visual. And so I need to say filter. Now I can't say filter the timetable, because if I do this, when I say filter the timetable, what that's saying is keep any filter that the visual has already applied and then go and add more filters. And so that's not going to work. So what I need to do is I need to filter an unfiltered copy of the timetable. And so I'm going to step through an unfiltered copy of the timetable, and then I need to go back and reapply the filters that I want. And so I need a filter on time ID has got to be greater than or equal to my from time, and double ampersand, I also need my time ID to be less than or equal to my to time ID. And when I do that, you can see that at this point there's only a single number here. You can see 12 and 15 makes 27, and so on. And this continues to rise until we get to 12, and then from then on it should be correctly giving me a rolling 12 period number. Now it's good practice to extract that, export the data, and just test to make sure that it's working. In this case, I know it is working. Okay, so now we need to deal with this other issue where the periods of time up until and including time ID 11 are not correct. And the reason these aren't correct is we need to go back to the previous day and get the time stamps from, in this case, the 13th of January. I can't do that because I filtered here on the 14th of January. Therefore, I can't go back and get the time from the 13th of January. So I need to resolve this. And in actual fact, for this period here, for period 11, I need to go back and get the last timestamp from the previous day, which is time ID 96. This one I need to go back and get 2 values. This one I need to go back and get 3 values, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a variable, what I've returned here, and I'll call this today's value. And so that's the portion of the rolling 12 period kilowatt hour consumption that occurred today. Now what I need to do is go and work out the portion that occurred on the previous day in the case that the time ID is 11 or before. So I guess the first thing I really need to do is to work out what is today's date. So I'll do another variable. So today, you can't use apostrophe, today's date equals selected value, same again, of the calendar date. Note now that I'm referring to the other calendar table. This time it's the one called calendar, not the calendar table called time. So let me check that it's working. Return today's date. So notice how I'm checking each step as I go. Don't worry about the formatting. So today's date is the 14th. So let's now work out what yesterday's date is. Is simply today's date -1. You can do this type of numerical subtraction off of a date. And so let's have a look. So this should return 13, so that's correct. And like any problem, what we need to do is we need to remove the filters that exist, and then we need to go and add back the filters that we want. Now, I'm a real believer in setting up a visual to help me think through the problem. And so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring the date column in so that I've got dates here, and I'm going to multi-select. So I've got 2 days. Just need to change the sort order. And so now I've got the progression of 2 days on the screen. So you can see here the cut over into the new date. And so when I go to this period here, I need to go back and grab this 96 from the previous day. And it therefore follows that if I want to go back and grab the 96 from the previous day, I need to remove this day filter and apply that as a day filter. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I need to create yesterday's value. I'm actually going to reuse this portion that I did before. So this will become yesterday's value. In fact, what I'll do is I'll create a variable and I'll return that number at the end. Okay, so what I'll do now is I need to take this same concept, but I need to add a new filter. I need to remove all the filters from the calendar table, and then I need to go and put a new filter on calendar date equals yesterday. So let's have a look at what happens now. And so what should be happening now is that this running value, which is actually yesterday's value, should be returning me the running total from yesterday, not from today. So I should just check that. And this total kilowatt hours would be better if I had an extra decimal place. So let's have a look. So we've got 1621,333. So let's go back 162,333. So that adds up to 333. So you can see that this measure is now returning me the running total from yesterday. But that's not what I need. Actually, what I need to do is I need, on this particular row here, I need to go and get 1 day from yesterday, 2 days from yesterday. And so I need to now rewrite this formula so that it collects the correct number of periods from the previous day. So let's work through that. What I'll do is, using the same from to, the to time ID yesterday is always going to be 96. Because I'm never going to go past that. And I need to write a variable to tell me the from time ID yesterday. And so what I really need to do here, now I think about it, is I need to work out how many periods do I need from yesterday. So I might just put in a placeholder. Periods needed. Now the periods I need from yesterday will be, well, it really depends, because if I'm after 12 then I don't need any. So I'll go if the to time ID is less than 12, then I'll need to go back and get some periods, and I'll need 12 subtract the 2 period. So I think less 1. Let's just check. We need to test this, so I'll copy that. And so this is saying 12 I need none, 11 I need none, actually I need 1, so that's incorrect. Once again, you'll see why I'm checking these as we progress. So you can see I need to get 1 from the prior day, 2 from the prior day, and so on, 11 from the prior day. All right, so it follows, now I know how many I need from yesterday. The to period, it's always going to end at 96. The from period, it must be 96 subtract the number of periods I need from yesterday. So let's just check this. And so for 11, it's saying I need from 95. Actually, that's not correct. For 11, I need from 96. So let me add 1 and test that. So for 11, from 96, from 10, it's from 95. So I'm now going from 95 and ending at 96. In fact, I don't even need this to time yesterday, but I'll leave it in there now that I've come this far. Okay, so yesterday's value will be time ID is greater than or equal to the from time ID yesterday and less than or equal to the to time ID yesterday. And I also need to change the date. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so for this 11 period, it's giving me 1651, which is this one. For the 10 period, it's giving me 2, this one plus this one. From the 1 period, it's giving me the running total from as far back as it needs to go. So that looks like the amount that I need from yesterday, and I've already got the amount that I need from today, and so I should just be able to add those together. And that should be the rolling total. And let me go ahead and export this to Excel and test it. So here's the data exported. So I know that at this point I need to sum from 1 to 12, and then if I copy those back and forward, and I can just do a check for the difference. And yeah, there are some rounding errors, but you can see that this formula is correctly giving me a rolling 12 period window. In this case, it's 3 hours total. And I'm doing that despite the fact that my date column and time column have been split into 2 pieces. And so the last thing I'm going to do is just change this visualization so I can see the data a little bit more easily. So I'll do a chart like this, and after a little bit of manipulation, I now have a nice column chart with a line chart overlaid. I'm showing the absolute 15-minute consumption in kilowatt hours in the columns. The line chart is showing me the rolling 3-hour average, and this works despite the fact that I have a filter on January 14th. These averages are going back in time to the 13th of January and grabbing the timestamps from the previous day. So like everything that I tell you and share with you on my YouTube channel, the whole point about this exercise is it's the process that you go through in order to solve problems. This is far more important than the absolute solution that I'm showing you today. So hopefully this has been a good learning experience.